Hi everyone, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Cedarburg Board of Education, October 29th, 2014, 7 p.m. This is a regular meeting of the board, and notices have been placed in the district as well as forwarded to the News Graphic and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. And would you all please rise with me to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Moving right on to item 4, resolutions and recognitions. First item is a recognition for board member Rick Leach from WASB. It's a member recognition for leadership and board development. And I'm going to read the recognition here. Cedarburg School District Board Member Rick Leach was recognized by the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, WASB, for his commitment to the Cedarburg School District. Leach earned this recognition by attending training opportunities by the Wisconsin Association of School Boards and or the National School Boards Association focused on student achievement and improving public education. WASB Executive Director John Ashley recognized Leach's accomplishments in a WASB regional meeting this fall. I commend Leach for his efforts to improve educational opportunities for young people in the community and to diligently work at ensuring an effective governing body, said Ashley. I thank Rick Leach for his work on behalf of public education in Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Association of School Boards is a nonprofit association that provides information and services to Wisconsin school boards in areas of school law and policy making, bargaining, legislation, and leadership development. Congratulations, Rick. Rick?
Next item.
All right.
Next one's more important.
That's right. The next one is the National Blue Ribbon Resolution to Cedarburg High School. And we've all been very proud of the high school and all very excited about this. And this is just a formal recognition from the Board of Education. And I'll read through this. Whereas Cedarburg High School has been named by the U.S. Department of Education as the Blue Ribbon 2014 Blue Ribbon School. Whereas Cedarburg High School is recognized for exemplary high performance. Whereas Cedarburg High School is one of only 337 schools across the entire nation selected for the 2014 cohort of National Blue Ribbon Schools and one of just 8 schools selected for this national honor in Wisconsin. Whereas Cedarburg High School in 2014 is the only Wisconsin high school named a Blue Ribbon School. Whereas Cedarburg School District recognizes Cedarburg High School students, teachers, staff, and administrators for their hard work and dedication in achieving this recognition. Whereas this recognition includes the performance of last year's students, so we also recognize Cedarburg High School class of 2014 for their hard work and dedication. Whereas the Cedarburg School District recognizes that for high school students to succeed, they need a strong educational foundation during their formative years. For this reason, we also recognize their parents and staff members of Parkview, Thorson, West Lawn, and Webster schools. Also, local parochial elementary schools that send students to Cedarburg High School and families in the surrounding communities who open and enroll in Cedarburg School District. Whereas, Cedarburg School District recognizes that for students to be high achieving, they need to be well-rounded students with access to great facilities and programs. So, we recognize our schools, PTOs, Cedarburg Athletic Booster Club, Cedarburg Education Foundation, and Cedarburg Klein Arts Boosters for their support. Now, therefore, be it resolved the Cedarburg Board of Education of the School District of Cedarburg congratulates Cedarburg High School students, staff, and all those responsible for this accomplishment and high honor of being named the 2014 National Blue Ribbon School. Respectfully, the Board of Education of the Cedarburg School District. Congratulations. Besides next item, I would take a motion at this time.
I'll motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item C.
Okay, congratulations to the following 2014 girls tennis state qualifiers. Number 1 singles, Jennifer Skornechny. Number 2 singles, Francesca Lalonde. Number 1 doubles, Amanda Skornechny and Lauren Rice, 6th place. And number 2 doubles, Sammy Kopa and Lydia Moser. Congratulations to the following 2014-2015 all-conference cross-country selections. Jack O'Neill, 1st team. Sydney Frank, 1st team. Jessie Frank, 2nd team. And Lorraine Tenpenny, honorable mention. Congratulations to the following 2014 all-conference girls golf. Ellie Bowman, 1st team. Hannah Tweetmeyer, 2nd team. Congratulations to the following boys soccer regional champs. Noah Baldwin, Jack Blasky, Henry Brizky, Andrew Edwards, Nat Eston, John Gibson, Sam Gomez, Ben Hanks, Jan Hora, Alex Jessel, Sam Kornetsky, Dominic Lynn, Kaylin Lujak, Bobby O'Neill, Brendan Rosh, Jordan Riegert, Zach Skorick, Eric Spaeth, Bill Vandenberg, and Matt Wansnyder.
All good news. All right, we will move on. Item 5, consent agenda, which includes minutes, budget and finance, and financial information as well, and the personnel report. Dr. Anderson.
As per our practice, on the consent agenda, you'll see the minutes reflected, as well as budget finance reports. If you have any questions, we'd be more happy to entertain those. But we do ask Conrad, if you would please, to read personnel.
We have no professional employees to recommend for contract for this year. We are fully staffed with our educators and administrators for this year. We, as always, have had a few of our support staff come and go, so you'll see on the report that we did have 4 people, 2 supervisory aides, writing center aide, and a paraprofessional from the middle school that left, and in that time period we've hired Lisa Bublitz as our accounts payable person in the central office, district office, Jim Burton as a student supervisory aide at the high school, Susan Lasky as a writing center aide at the high school, Jacqueline McFadden as a paraprofessional at Parkview, Charles Mirkey as a student supervisory aide at the high school, and Shelley Rose as a paraprofessional at Webster.
Includes the consent agenda. Take a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries unanimously. And reports and recommendations. Dr. Lynch.
The first item will be discussed at the end of the meeting, just prior to closed session. So I'd like to move to item B. I recommend that the Board of Education accept the $15,000 donation from the Cedarburg Booster Club to be used for Cedarburg High School to update the fitness center in Phase 2.
Move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second by Mark. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries unanimously.
Next item, I recommend that the Board of Education accept a $1,000 donation from Eric Hisbuster, Jen Net, to be used for the Cedarburg High School's Engineering Club for the robotics program.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Carries unanimously.
Next item, I recommend that the Board of Education accept a donation of $500 from Nels Picros to be used by the Cedarburg High School for their Best Buddies program.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against, motion carries.
The next item, recommend the Board of Education accept a $1,000 grant and a $300 grant from Fuel Up to Play 6 Wisconsin Dairy Council to be used by the Forson Elementary School for physical activity, equipment, and nutrition taste tests.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against, motion carries unanimously. Great.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to the workforce 2020-66.3 agreement. Todd?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This evening, I bring forward the Workforce 2020-6630 agreement. This is an annual agreement that's brought before the board. This is to approve our youth apprenticeship program. We are part of a 6-district consortium, which includes Washington, Cedarburg, Grafton, Northern Wazaki, Random Lake, and Martinsville. This consortium allows our students to participate in apprenticeships around the area. This year, currently, we have 16 students participating. We generally get about $4,000, $500 per student to cover the administrative cost in running the program. We have students this year participating in finance, health science, information technology, manufacturing, transportation, distribution and logistics, hospitality and tourism. So a number of different apprenticeships that our students are participating in. It's my recommendation that the board approve the Workforce 2020-6630 agreement.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor?
I would like to say, I think these types of workforce youth apprenticeship concepts are really wonderful for our students to provide the ability to get out and see. Some students aren't, maybe they are going to go to 4-year college or 2-year, but some want to see what it's like in the outside world, and it's a great way to allow them to do that while still in high school and kind of check out what's out there in the future for them. So I'm totally supportive of these types of workforce development programs. I think it's a great idea.
Anyone else?
Is the responsibility to operate, does that rotate among districts at times, or does somebody just kind of spearhead that and they kind of keep it going?
Right now, it's one individual who kind of oversees the consortium, and the technology used to offset the costs of that individual running the consortium. My experience has been that it has moved around. I don't know in this particular area, but being part of the other consortium, sometimes that does rotate. But my understanding is it's been the same individual for the last couple of years.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
And then Todd, on to item G, CISA contract, 6.
So we are, as you know, have joined CISA 6 and their educator effectiveness program, and this disclosure agreement allows CISA 6 to work with us when troubleshooting our evaluation system. So there are times when we must be in contact with them to help them or help us understand better how to maneuver through the system, and to have questions about the format or the logistics regarding the program. And at times they will view teacher information that's in there in order to problem solve. And this is an agreement to ensure that confidentiality is maintained when they're in that system.
Any questions?
I do have a quick question. Do you know who drafted these agreements? Just curious as to who's the drafting party. Is this drafted kind of by our district or by CISA 6 or?
I believe this is drafted by CISA 6. It was not drafted by us.
Okay.
This is a standard agreement that they send to all the districts that they cooperate with. I hesitated because I sent an email today just to get a bit more information on this from Lori, and I didn't receive anything. But my understanding is that it's a standard boilerplate agreement that they send out to all the districts that they work with.
Mr. Career and your non-legal opinions on this.
It's pretty standard.
I'll move approval.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries
In your board packet, you received a memo and a copy of the resolution to authorize $2.5 million for temporary cash flow needs. This is to accommodate timing of expenditures paid and revenues received. Our largest deficit is $2.2 million, and it's in January prior to receipt of our property taxes. Bid documents were sent to 9 potential bidders on October 22nd and were due today. 3 bids were received. There was at your place setting tonight is the 3 bids. As you can see, Town Bank bid on the full $2.5 million with a rate of 0.42% for an interest expense of $4,025. At PNF, we talked about the last 5 years, how low the interest rate has been, and in your memo, I did include a table. And this is the lowest it's been in 5 years. The range for the last 5 years has been between 0.658% and 0.911%. We borrowed money for just the time we needed, about 140 days. Are there any questions?
I think it's great. I mean, it's really incredible interest rates. That it's 0.4% is 0.42 is really wonderful. It's a no-brainer.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Have a motion, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried unanimously.
Who seconded that?
Kind of goes to the guy with white hair.
What's the third ranking?
Glasses? Rock, paper, scissors. All right. And we'll move on to item I.
Each year at this time, the school board amends the budget for changes to the tax levy and state aid amounts. This type of budget amendment requires a 2/3 vote of the school board, and a Class 1 notice must be published within 10 days. Also, the tax levy must be certified to municipalities on or before November 10th. Included in your packet was a memo with attachments outlining the changes to the levy and budget, along with recommendations discussed in detail by the Personnel and Finance Committee on October 15th and October 22nd. The updated proposed levy produced a decrease in the tax rate of 1.90%. The key changes listed in the memo include a resident enrollment increase of 4 students, which was initially estimated to be down 21. Unfortunately, there is no change to the revenue limit due to the fact that the revenue limit includes a 3-year rolling average for enrollment, and the district also receives a declining enrollment exemption, which adjusts as the enrollment changes. The increase to the revenue limit is offset by a decrease to the declining enrollment exemption. Though there is little impact this year, the increase will help increase aid next year and keep the revenue limit more stable in future years. Next, the equalized value was adjusted to reflect an increase of 2.92%, which is greater than the 0% increase presented at the August budget hearing. And finally, the October 15th equalization aid was adjusted to reflect a decrease of $166,500, or 1.92% from the prior year, but it's actually an increase of $176,406 from the July estimate, which was expected to increase at least $150,000. With these changes, the total tax levy reflects an increase of 0.96% and generates a tax rate of 9.93845, or the decrease of 1.90%, and an estimated tax decrease of 57.86 on a $300,000 home. Levying to the full revenue limit authority allows the district to utilize a positive budget balance of $134,602. The positive balance is mainly from open enrollment students added from the original amount approved, and a 0% increase in health insurance effective with our January 1st, 2015 renewal. PNF discussed potential uses for the positive budget balance, and it is recommended that the school board approve allocating $13,000 to create an instrument inventory, $20,000 for the creation of a strategic wellness program, and to commit $101,632 to fund balance for future bonus compensation for effective performance. An instrument inventory was completed based on information discussed at the Board Curriculum Committee. A 5-year replacement cycle was developed, and year 1, which is this school year, will see the replacement of a timpani set from 1967 and a piano from 1990. If you notice in your memo, there's a picture of the timpani set.
Is that the actual thing you said?
It's going to look like that, yes. I talked to Clayton about it.
Okay.
An Insurance Strategic Planning Committee was formed this year, and recommendations from the committee will be detailed to the Board Insurance Committee on November 17th. One of the topics discussed in length includes finding ways to ensure employees have the tools to assist them with healthy living. This in turn will assist in keeping insurance increases to a minimum. The approval of $20,000 to start a strategic wellness program would be beneficial in helping the Strategic Planning Committee achieve its long-term goals. Lastly, committing an additional $101,632 to fund balance for future bonus compensation for effective performance will bring the total to $150,000. The intent of these funds is to keep the bonus amount consistent over an extended period of time. 2 separate resolutions were also included that will need approval and are detailed in the table in your memo. And I'll just explain that real quickly. If you recall, in July, we approved the balance that was left of the $300,000 for teacher bonuses. That was $40,428. The bonus checks were released at the end of September to people who came back to school this year. The employees that didn't come back, those checks are voided, and an additional $7,940 is available from that. So that's resolution number 1. Then the second resolution is the $101,632, and that's an odd number because when you add those 3 together, that gives us even $150,000. So that amount would be resolution number 2. Just real quickly, I'll go through the attachments. Attachment number 1 is the tax levy, the proposed tax levy chart. On that chart, you can see highlighted in gray is the amount from the budget hearing. At that time, we had some other scenarios too, but the item in gray is what was approved, and that was an anticipated increase of 59.57 per taxpayer on a $300,000 home. Then in yellow is the tax levy I just talked about with the decrease to the tax rate of 1.90%. Attachment number 2 is the required notice of change in adopted budget as suggested by DPI. And this always looks confusing because it really only reflects the accounts that have been changed. It doesn't reflect any accounts that have not been changed. So if you look, the first page is the general fund, which is Fund 10. The first item, which is taxes under 210, you can see there's a decrease in the taxes there. Then if you go down a little bit to account 620, that's where our aid is, and of course there's an increase there, and that's where the change in the levy is reflected. We did talk about at P&F, account number 690, we did receive more computer aid, so you can see the increase of $39,000 there. Then finally, the bottom section is the fund balance section. This kind of outlines all the changes due to the resolutions and the funds going in and out of committed and unassigned. So the first line, fund balance committed, you can see the initial $40,000, then the $150,000 for the increase. Unassigned, we're taking the $7,900 out of there and putting it in the committed. And then actually the fund balance will be an increase of $101,000 until we have approval to use those funds. Page, the backside of the amendment reflects changes to Fund 27, and that's mainly just adding some grant changes, our flow-through and our preschool entitlement grant. There's it's same revenues equal expenditures, so there's no change there. And then finally, just some small final adjustments to our community services funds of $141. Attachment number 3 is the budget projection and reconciliation. And again, we did go over this in detail at the P&F committee, and I do use this as a historical document. So if you go to the bottom, you can see in green where the adjustments start. The largest increase is for the open enrollment, increase, it says increase to open enrollment, that's 167,000. And then the health insurance 0% increase garnered us 74,000. So if you go over to the right-hand side, where the yellow highlighting starts, you can see that's where the $134,632 is for the positive balance. And then the recommended expenditures are after that. And again, just for historical reasons, what's happening with the fund balance is listed at the bottom of this chart. And then finally, the two attachments, attachment 4 and attachment 5. The first one is taking the money out of unassigned and putting it into committed for the people that did not return for the bonus program, and then the additional $101,632 to add to make it a total of $150,000. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question. I don't remember the wellness thing coming up at PNF. Can you-
That came up at the second meeting, the second PNF meeting.
Oh,
that you
okay,
were
the one I
at.
missed.
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell me, like, in 2 sentences, what $20,000 is used for?
We will be presenting in November. We won't, we'll get approval from the board on what we're gonna spend it on. We're anticipating starting biometric screenings and things like that on a volunteer basis.
We just waited for you to be gone that night, Dave. Oh, I know. It's the meeting.
Kevin, did you have
Yeah, I
something?
did. I just had a quick question, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Karen. It looks like the fund balance of the increase of 101,000, so it's $7.5 million now. Do you know what percentage that would be about?
Sure. I actually brought it up when I did it. I'll just round it. It's, when I take out the 150,000 that we have committed, it's about 20.63% would be the fund balance percentage with that removed. Our policy says 15 to 20%, and then anything over 15% we can commit for different items.
Great, thank you. I would like to just make a comment, kind of to Jeff's question, to the question raised earlier by Dave Greer on the wellness side of things. The insurance committee, as we met with the consultant, they talked a lot, we see it in private sector, these wellness programs, trying to set up employees to start taking care of their own health and understanding issues before they become major. They talked quite a bit about the benefits of that, of doing that in your insurance costs. So seeing it on the private sector side coming into play so much now, I was kind of one of the supporters saying we need to kind of do more than just, rollbacks and things like that. We really need to help people, employees, share their families to work towards this wellness thing. So we really never discussed what it would be used for, just kind of said, let's set aside some money so we don't have.
Yeah, and the whole wellness thing is something that probably is getting input from employees and such from the, in the insurance committee. Because I know they're not always well received by all employees, I being one of them.
I know why.
But, yeah, it's in the works, and it's nothing that we're committing to tonight specifically.
Right, it's just kind of budgeting, but there's no discussion even yet about what it would be, so we just wanted to make sure we had
Thank you,
money set aside.
Karen, what do we need to do to approve this? 3 motion?
How would you prefer it?
Tax levy first, certification first, then 2 resolutions, or?
Yeah, so let's make it 4. Let's do
4.
the tax levy.
Okay.
Then budget, then resolution,
Correct.
then resolution.
I'll move to approve the tax levy as shown.
Second that.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries unanimously.
Is this where I'm supposed to change my vote? Like, oh, never mind, I'm not, I forgot.
Alright, and the budget amendment?
I'll move to approve the budget amendment as stated.
Second.
As shown.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries unanimously. Resolution on attachment 4.
I'll move to approve the resolution on attachment 4 for the $7,940 teacher bonus compensation.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And resolution on pension fund.
I'll move to approve resolution as shown on 5, $101,632 for bonus compensation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second, any discussion? I'd just like to say before we end all this up, this comes with a lot of work and a lot of heavy lifting by the P&L committee and of course by Karen and staff, and just a fantastic job as usual. So any further discussion?
No, I just want to agree with you. Kudos to the integrative team and Karen and all those meetings of the finance committee that I slough off and don't show up at. Great job, guys.
You took the words out of my mouth, Mr. President. Karen and the staff and the P&F committee have done an outstanding job. Taxpayers ought to be pleased with the results. Not often we can let them know there's a decrease.
Hopefully this year the other taxing entities won't spend that money so that the taxpayers don't see the savings we give them.
And I do want to also jump on everybody else's bandwagon. I think seeing the process evolve over, say, a decade here, I really appreciate the way you've evolved this over the past 4, 5, 6 years. I mean, it's so much smoother than it used to be. We come to this meeting and not know really what we were going to get presented and have to go through it in great detail and lots of questions. You have to think on your feet to come up with, to understand it. And now to see this process month after month after month, and we just work our way towards the final goal is so much easier and far less painful for everybody, and especially for a board member to being able to vote for, because I know what each of these line items were when they got put in there. So it's a much better process, and I thank you and the whole group for their efforts, and the staff and the administrators for going through their budgets and come up with savings where they can find them what's truly needed. Fight for those. It's a great process, so I appreciate your efforts.
And I thank the P&F committee too. It's great when it happened at the first P&F committee. One board member asked a question I was ready to answer, and another board member answered it before I did. So that's great. Everyone's always very involved. So thank you.
How many meetings are there approximately?
P&F meetings.
I mean, before, like there were 2 this month.
There were 2 this month, but prior to that, probably about 6.
So I think you plan to start planning tomorrow for next week.
Sure he has.
She already has.
No, I take a break till November.
Is there,
I think we start looking at February or late January for the next one.
Mr. Chair?
As the short end of the stick on the nomination of the chairman committee, I always get outvoted in this every year, it seems like, by Mr. Kennedy and company. But my kudos to Karen and staff. I mean, John, staff did a great job going through this and giving Karen ideas, and she organizes this and really has some great thoughts as we roll through it. I mean, and Todd and Karen, you guys even came back with the band valuation as to what you did with the inventory, and were creative enough then to figure out, hey, we need some new equipment. I really can't say I've seen that in a budget before, and how many school districts have money like that where it's a tax decrease, money put aside to purchase band equipment. It's not a lot, but it's 2 big pieces, and still fund money into a bonus program in the future. Yeah, that's a lot to say for what you 2 do and what everyone else does, John, on your staff, and the little control that we have to be able to work together on this. So thank you.
I appreciate that. The one thing I'd like to mention for the benefit of the audience, this is the first time, one, we have graphics in the document, so that's a highlight, right? Yeah, so and secondly, I just want to express professionally my appreciation for your commitment to commit fund balance to a 3-year pay for effective performance program. It's one of the comments that resonated at each of the meetings, a comment I had with staff, that they appreciated that the actual bonus amount, dollar amount, is fixed for 3 years. They, of course, everyone hopes that it increases over time, but at least it's fixed, so that when they think about performance and they know what the expectations are, and they strive to stretch for those expectations, that they know what kind of goal what could be achieved on the financial, not that that's the motivation, but at least it's predictable. So I just wanted to thank you for your willingness to do that, so that we can in fact fund this, that the predictability and staff can actually, you know, be thinking about what this really means to them on a personal level as well as a professional level. So thank you very much for these elections.
Teamwork.
Absolutely. Now, I didn't forget,
You haven't
I
voted yet.
have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? On attachment 5, the motion made by Rick, that's $120,603. All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. All right, superintendent.
The first item is a CNI update from Todd.
Thank you, John. Just a few items I wanted to bring you up to date on that we've been working on in the CNI department. This year has been a very busy year where the teachers and administrators are really engaged on a number of initiatives, and they range from educator effectiveness to a new assessment system, literacy collaborative, a learning initiative. Of course, we're working to exceed the standards. We have curriculum work and assessment work going on. So there's plenty that we're highly engaged in. And I thought I'd just take a few minutes to share some things with you that you may or may not be aware of. So we just completed the first ACT Aspire testing at the high school level, freshman level, online, kind of historic. It's always been pencil paper. We had 285 students participate in that, and they'll take that test again in the spring. It all went well. There were some technical difficulties with a Java download that impacted our Chromebooks at the last moment, but we were able to work through that. Heidi Nolan did a fabulous job along with the high school administrative team in solving that issue.
What percentage of students is that?
The entire freshman class, that's what that 285 is.
All right.
So, out of, what percentage is that of the high school?
I think we tested 285 out of 287,
Okay.
so we almost tested 100% of high school freshmen.
We had tested the 8th grade ACT, the 8th grade took the ACT Aspire earlier in the year, and we were hoping that we were going to be able to work out a lot of the kinks with that. If you recall, the 8th grade used to take the Explorer, and we decided to move, that's no longer there, and we decided to continue with the ACT Aspire. And we did solve a lot of the issues when we did the testing with the 8th grade. So I think that helped a great deal in having a fairly seamless, flawless testing session at the high school. We're in the midst of the WKC testing right now. That's still the only paper pencil test that the state requires, and that is at 4th, 8th, and 10th grade in the area of social studies and science. We are testing about 711 kids across the district. Again, that's 4th, 8th, and 10th grade. Those results will be embargoed until probably late March, early April. I anticipate that test will be digital version in the very, very near future. Looking ahead, we have additional assessments, obviously, in the spring. The new Smarter Balance assessment is going to take place, 3rd through 8th grade. We'll be testing about 1,200 students, and all of that will be online. In addition, we have the 11th grade. Juniors are taking their ACT in March, and the sophomores will be testing as well as the freshmen. So this is a very busy year regarding assessment. We were having a conversation today at our RTI meeting, the administration and the teachers that were present. We were just talking about the number of assessments we have going on in the district. And so this is just a glance, the number of assessments that have been added to our plate over the last few years. And the conversation is now turning to what is the information we're getting from those assessments, and are there assessments that we do as a district that are not required at the state level that we can potentially pull back on, or maybe have limited testing on, because we certainly don't want to spend the vast majority of our time assessing or preparing for assessment. So that's an ongoing conversation that's beginning. It has been going on, but it's going to continue through this year and definitely into next year. Any comments or questions about that? Dave, I can see you.
I have a question. I'm just wondering, let's say just for the sake of argument, that the legislature undoes the Smarter Balance assessment before March. Do we have a plan for some other type of testing, or what would we do in that situation?
So if they, Yeah, it would depend on what level they're looking at. If it was the 3rd through 8th grade, we currently have the map assessment
We
done
use the map.
3 times a year. We do that in the fall, winter, and spring. And that would be one of those assessments that we may consider doing something differently if in fact the state testing continues. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That's a great question. Another item that we're working on in CNI is the Literacy Collaborative. This is the literacy framework that came out of Ohio State University. We have literacy coaches at all 3 of the elementary and 1 at the middle school, and it was last, I want to say January, that they came to the board and did a very nice job with their presentation. We had 2 of the lead instructors from Ohio State University here last week, and they spent time working with the middle school coach and the elementary coaches. So they observed our coach teaching and provided feedback. They observed our coach coaching and provided feedback, and they observed our teachers delivering the literacy collaborative framework and provided feedback to the teachers. So it was a well appreciated and welcome visit by these lead literacy experts from Ohio State. Part of that initiative is to provide 40 hours of professional development to our teachers who are involved in the Literacy Collaborative, and we have provided just about 20 hours of PD to our teachers, 3rd through 8th grade, who are involved with English language arts and or reading. And that PD has been around interactive read-alouds, reading workshop and writing workshop, and the benchmark assessment system, and guided reading. And we have about 20 hours left to deliver yet this year, and that will be around the area of book study, language, poetry workshop, and refining some of our practices. So we are deep into the Literacy Collaborative, and the teachers are working diligently, so are the coaches, and we're making great progress. We're listening to the teachers because obviously when you have a new initiative, there's a learning curve, and when you have many new items on our plate, like the educator effectiveness, learning balance assessment, and learning initiative, we need to be cognizant of capacity, and that's one of the things that we are certainly aware of. Questions about that one?
Just a quick item, if you could elaborate a little bit with the people from Ohio State that were here, can you go into a little more detail, like that process when they observed, and what the takeaways were from that for our staff, like what type of things did they see that they said, hey, this is what we should improve upon, or they
Sure. So I stopped in 2 times. Once the coach from Ohio State University was working with one of our coaches and was providing her with feedback on some questioning techniques that she could use with the teacher in providing feedback and getting further understanding of the literacy practices that teacher was using in her classroom. So it was coaching the coach in essence. And the next time I stopped in, the coach was observing a teacher deliver the literacy work or literacy practices. And I did not stay for the feedback. What I did see the types of notes that she was taking, and there were notes about pacing, too much teacher maybe directed, great questioning, and follow-up questioning on some of the students. And she was there for 45 minutes, I was only there for about 20 minutes, but it was that type of thing. And so when that teaching session was over, the coach would meet with that teacher, and our coach would be involved with that, and there would be kind of a triad conversation regarding what the coach witnessed.
Sounds like it's valuable feedback on tweaking your
Extremely
professional
valuable.
approach to education.
Absolutely, and what makes it so valuable is that it's someone from outside the district. You know, when you have an expert come in from outside the district and provide feedback, it just resonates much more with the staff members. Yeah. That's good. The third thing I just want to update you on, October 13th, Jane and I went to Madison so she could receive her award, the Title I award for being a high achieving and high progress school. So we hung out in Madison together for a day. We went to Monona Terrace and spent the morning there, attended a few Title I sessions on improving instructional practices, had a nice lunch, and then we all marched up to the Capitol. And it was there in the Capitol, in the Rotunda, that we had an opportunity to see the number of schools that were receiving this acknowledgement. And it was there that Mike Thompson, the deputy superintendent, called each school up individually and presented a plaque to the school. And just a reminder, Jane's school was one of 8 schools in the state that received that acknowledgement. So that was an exciting time. Jane drove to and from Madison, and It was an exciting, fast ride. Lots of conversation, and I was talking the speed of her driving, so we covered a lot.
Can you talk about that next insurance?
Yeah, that wellness program, I'm going to take advantage of it. So, all joking aside, it was a very meaningful and wonderful experience. And I've said to Jane, and I've said this to Jeff many times, it's not often that administrators are acknowledged for their hard work. And many times we go through our routine and we don't take time to pause and reflect. And when we get these kind of recognitions, we need to make certain we take time to pause and reflect, because it's quite an honor to be acknowledged like that. The other item I just wanted to bring up to speed, this past Saturday, we had a Discovery Education Streamathon. Rachel York is an ambassador for Discovery Education, and we had 21 teachers here on Saturday that volunteered to come here from our district and 4 other districts, and they took part in a Streamathon, which was streaming live video, and there were 3,000 educators across the country who participated in that. We had some on-site presentations as well. A gentleman by the name of Joe Diaz, who is a guru with Discovery Education, came and provided a face-to-face session on diving deep into Discovery Education. And Discovery Education is an online resource that allows teachers to access real-time information on any content area. And it also provides lesson plans, opportunities for teachers to flip the lesson, so they can provide information where students can gather that information, review it at home, and then come back and actually react to that information in the classroom under the teacher's guidance. So it's some of that flipping component going on. So it was well attended. I think it's one of the benefits of having Rachel York here in the district. She's well networked, and as an ambassador of Discovery, we have access to a lot of those kind of resources. And it was free, which was a big bonus. Lastly, I just want to mention educator effectiveness. We're deep into it. All the teachers and all certified staff had to present and input their student learning objectives into our system. And principals and teachers have been diligently having conversation around those school learning objectives, which is similar to a SMART goal. And now the process is to ensure that the teachers are working to achieve that goal. So we're looking at data, adjusting practices, having conversations. On the administrative end, we are talking about the goals at our district leadership council. We are having conversations so we can ensure that the quality of goal, a teacher's goal at Westlawn, we're looking at it through the same type of lens when we're looking at Thorson or Parkview or at the middle school or at the high school. So it's that calibration aspect that we are having conversation around, which is very fruitful and meaningful conversation as an administrative team. So that's a quick update as to some of the happenings in the CNI department. Any questions about any of those items?
Just a comment, congratulations, Jane.
Congratulations.
And I need a note on radar on here, so.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
That was actually just a bad attempt at sarcasm.
And what are the grade levels for the literacy collaborative this year? Is it third?
All the grades are 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. They're all receiving coaching, and they are all receiving the professional development. And each of the literacy coaches is assigned to work within one classroom. So they have a lab classroom that they're working with. And I think there's one at 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
Does it extend to 6th as well?
Yeah, yep. Bunny's at the middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And I believe this year she was, I want to say a 7th grade class. Yeah, 7th grade. Yep.
The only reason I mention that is that the literacy collaborative is high expectation for students, but also high expectation for staff.
Yes.
And staff members, teachers, as you interact with teachers, especially in those grade levels, we want to try to encourage them and just let them know we do acknowledge what an extraordinary effort they're making to learn a different process, to really expand their knowledge in this area, and be trained and implemented at the same time, which typically is the best professional development model, as opposed to being trained and not using it, and then forget it, and then you try to use it the next year. So, but it does create its own level of concern in terms of, the high expectation that staff have for their own performance and their own expectations, which are highly elevated in terms of doing their best for students. as you run into grade, teachers at that grade level, I'm sure they would appreciate any, support that you'd like to make, because this year, there's a lot going on, especially fifth grade with the learning initiative, technology, sixth grade, so to whatever extent that's helpful, just wanted to mention.
One, I don't know if it's a question as much as a comment, but back on various testing you did, I saw the sheet you had, and I have no idea how many different tests were on there, but it was a substantial number. And, well, I'm sure I'm off somewhat, there's, the school year is probably a 35 to 40 week program. Do we ever consider, are there other experts out there who are looking at the extent to which we are doing these standardized tests on our student body and what the cost is in terms of the lost classroom time while they are taking these tests? Because there's got to be, what, 15, 20 on there? Can you comment on it? I'm not looking for a big, long discussion, but
We've, last year, when I presented to the curriculum committee of the board, and we were talking about the assessment, I did have hours attached to a number of these assessments, and you can see that it's a significant amount of time that is spent in just the assessment itself, not necessarily the prepping, the teacher prep work, or prepping the students, or the system itself. So it's a significant amount of time, and that was kind of the conversation we were having today with the RTI committee, is the amount of time that we're using to administer these tests, and the information we get back. Is that information already readily available based on some of the assessments that we have built into our curriculum? So curriculum-based measures, are those already in place? And that's the nature of that kind of conversation, which is much more natural assessment as part of the curriculum than having something from the outside coming in. So that's a conversation, Phil, that we are having. It is a significant amount of time.
I presume we'll talk more about it in the curriculum.
It's going to be an ongoing conversation, not only in our district, but across the state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
The assessments are, like so many things in the curriculum, everything's added. We probably can't recall a time when an assessment was taken away. It might have been replaced by something, but so much of it has been added over time, and I'm just grateful that we're at a point when we can start looking at that, so that we can make some intelligent prospective determinations, what we might peel off, to make sure that we still have the prescriptive data for students to be able to make good instructional decisions, which is the most important piece. But make sure that we don't have second and third level redundancy in assessments. But it's at a point that it's amazing, to be honest with you. So grateful we're at that point.
Thank you.
Yep, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next item is to review the school district mission. However, I see some gentlemen from Ehlers have arrived, and I ask you guys just to come down and introduce yourselves. We're going to switch over to item 6A and discuss the TID. And what we're looking for here from you guys is to ask any questions of the Ehlers. Any kind enough to come here. We're working with the city on this TID. And as you know, we're part of a committee consisting of the County, the city of Cedarburg, ourselves, Milwaukee Area Technical College, and we will meet as a committee. The committee is represented by the school, from the school district by Dr. Lamberson, and we're trying to come to some consensus on what you got. Let the record reflect that David Creer is leaving the room. Since he is on the economic development committee for the city as well as the school board.
So I'm going to come back to the other.
Oh yeah, you're coming back.
All right, you gotta get me.
All right. for Dr. Lamberson. Any questions you have of the gentleman from Ayers? And John, would you like to kick it off a little further?
Thanks, Chris. First off, Todd, thank you very much for coming tonight and making yourself available. Really appreciate that. And thank the board for volunteering me for the Joint Review Board. I appreciate that you all very, very much. The Joint Review Board is meeting November 18th. The goal of tonight is to make sure that you don't feel compelled to send me a text or an email or a voicemail on the 19th, the morning after. Why did you vote the way that you did in representing the school district? I will make the best intelligent decision that I can based on your feedback. You're not voting on this evening. I would just like to have some sense of consensus. And if there's no consensus, that's constructive for me as well. But I will do my best in my duty to ask questions and fulfill the role on the review board. So tonight, as Chris mentioned, just be able to ask any questions. Todd, if you wouldn't mind just maybe
You want to give us some real quick overview?
Sure, that'd be great. And then we'll just open up the questions.
I don't know, does the board have a copy of the project plan?
Yes, they do.
They do, okay. There's probably 4 pages in there that I would just highlight quickly. So if you can locate that document, and if you don't have a copy, I do have extras here. But I'm first going to go to page 8 of the document, which is the map. And you're probably familiar with the site, but this is really the last remaining vacant area within Cedarburg downtown. It consists of 2 parcels, roughly 1/2 acre, and this would be designated as a blighted area district based on not only the amount of time that the site has remained vacant, but also contaminated evidence on that site. And the district could have a maximum life of up to 27 years as a blighted area TID. The next page I would highlight then would be page 15.
Of that, you mentioned they're blighted.
Yes.
Is that just the portion abutting Washington Avenue that is blighted, and the other side that abuts Hanover is not blighted? Is that the way I understand it?
The way that we've got this set up, they're both being determined to be blighted, although only 50% has to be blighted under the statutory construct. So my understanding as I learn more about this parcel is it sounds like on the western end is where there's a greater concern, but you know, the reports we saw in terms of the environmental indicated that there were locations throughout the site that potentially could be problematic. So that contamination is one of the reasons that the city feels necessary to use tax increment financing because of the potential additional costs that a developer may incur depending on what actually happens when you start moving dirt around. And in addition to the fact that at least the further east site is also within the historical district, it can be expected there will be additional costs associated with that. In terms of tax increment districts, this one is relatively small. Often there are a large number of parcels with a large number of different project costs. But on page 15, you'll see that the scope is fairly limited, and really the primary project cost the city's proposing is a cash grant, also known as a development incentive. And the way the agreement between the city and the developer is structured to work is whatever value is established once the district is created, as long as it's at least $950,000, that's the minimum above what's there today that has to be achieved, the city will pay an incentive over time from the tax increment equal to 25% of that incremental value. The agreement also says that the city will pay 3% interest on any unpaid balance. Because this will be paid from tax increments over time, the city is not bringing money to the table up front and giving it to the developer. So the $310,234 that you see, that's a principal incentive amount of $237,500 based on 25% of that minimum $950 value, plus the anticipated interest that would be accrued and paid out until that obligation is fully satisfied. There also will be some city expenses involved. Most of those are up front, involved with the creation of the district, but there's also ongoing annual expenses. So all told, we're looking at about $375,000 in project costs over the life of the TID. I'm going to skip ahead then to,
Can I ask you a quick question before you?
absolutely.
Former village president, so I've done a few of these.
Okay.
Half acre. I've never seen one that small. How often does that happen? It's gotta be extremely rare.
It's actually not that rare. I mean, this one is geographically very small, but I think what we've seen probably, particularly since 2000, 2007 and 8, when the economy stumbled, is we're not seeing sort of a vast expanse of TIFs where infrastructure is put in and sort of the speculation that development will occur. Normally now, TIF development is going hand in hand with a specific proposed development project. So now it's more common that we'll see the boundaries of the tax increment district simply be the project site, rather than also including other parcels that may be there for future development. So yes, it's definitely on the small side, but a project-specific tax increment district in itself is not terribly unusual.
What about the length, piggyback on Rick's question? Something of this size is the term, the 26 years, 27 years, is that typical?
Well, we'll see in a moment that we don't anticipate using that whole term, but the term is either 27 years or it's 20 years, and that's dependent on the type of district. A blighted area district is always 27 years max. The industrial district or a mixed-use district is always a 20-year maximum. So that's a function of statute. It has to close, though, once its project costs are paid off. It can't just remain open until that max time if there's not still liabilities to be retired. The final 3 pages I'm going to touch on are page 19, 20, and 21. And what you see on page 19 is simply a table of development assumptions. For purposes of the project plan, we're assuming that only the minimum $950,000 in value is going to be achieved. We would obviously hope more value would be achieved, and in turn there would be a larger incentive. But we're assuming the $950,000. We're also assuming it's going to have a 2-year build-out, 2015 and 2016, although the development agreement actually allows up to the year 2020 for full build-out and completion of the site. Based on that $950,000, if you flip to page 20, we have then a forecast of the tax increments that will be collected over the life of the district. The green column in the center of that exhibit shows the actual tax collection. The first year revenue would be received if construction does commence in 2015. Would be the year 2017, budget 2017, and about a $10,000 increment that bumps up to about $20,000 once the second building is built, and remains in that $20,000 to $25,000 range for the remainder of the TID. On page 21, then, we show the cash flow. And on the left-hand side of this exhibit, you'll see in that first column the tax increments, which are carried over from that prior exhibit. And again, the primary project cost is the pay-as-you-go cash grant. And what we show then is that payments being made with the accrued interest totaling the $310,000, $234,000 you saw on the prior page. And again, the way this works is that the city will realize the tax increments. It will first pay off any of its current year liabilities, and then whatever dollars are left on an annual basis go in satisfaction of the development incentive until it's retired. And this projection indicates that we would expect that to be the case by the year 2035. So we're closing up about 20 years versus using the full 27. If the project values out more, the incentive will be greater, but you'll have more tax increments coming in, so that doesn't have an effect on the closeout year. It should close in any event at about the year 2035, give or take a year. The only other thing we wanted to offer is one thing that's not always real well known is that school districts are impacted a bit differently than cities, counties, and technical college districts when you're looking at the idea of the foregone tax increments. And I brought my colleague Keith Reitman with me this evening. Keith is our schools guy. He's previously from school district administration before coming to Ehlers, and I would just ask him to briefly touch on how school districts are impacted differently in terms of what the effect is on your aids and taxes.
Before you start, does the Hanover site start first or the Washington site? The side or west side, or is
There,
nowhere?
the site plan, to my understanding, has not actually even been submitted yet, so there's no detailed development plan. Right now, we're just in the process of the agreement and creating the TIF, so I don't have any specific
Can
details
that
on
be approved by the plan commission and then the state?
Right, all the creation of the TIF does is put the financial architecture in place to allow for this. The developer will still have to go through the normal process in terms of getting development approvals.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, good evening. And so to help support the school understanding of the TID, when I joined Ellers, I prepared kind of an analysis, as a summary one page, and I think you have that on your table. And it really just gives the highlights of the school finance impacts of the TID on your district finances. And so we broke into really three areas. We look at the state aid, the revenue limit impact, and then your impact on your tax levy and your tax rate. And so we simply take the most recent DPI information, the October 15th age certification data, and look at it status quo as the DPI produces it with current property tax bases. We then add in your TID, the estimated TID value of that $1.2 million, and that gives us a really just a change or a difference in what we're seeing in the state aid. And as we'd expect, because we're dividing the $1.2 million TID value into a $2.15 billion overall valuation for the district, we wouldn't expect to see much of an impact on the analysis. We don't see much. But as you can see, the aid is down about $12,000 if we just raise the property values and keep everything else constant within that formula. So look at the revenue limit formula, there is no impact because property valuation is not a variable that affects your revenue authority as a district. We just put that in there to demonstrate that. And then on the tax levy side, you're then able to tax in or raise your taxes by that $12,000 amount to make up for the loss in state aid. So that's how that would look. The reason we do this on aid is there's so many mechanics that go into school finance with enrollments and all the other variables that go into it that if we try to predict all those things 10 or 20 or more years out, that just wouldn't work well. So we overlay it on the current year.
Can I just clarify that then?
Yes.
The 12,147 that we'll lose, we can add to everyone else's tax bill so that they can subsidize this development, is basically what.
Not really, because when you would add this tax levy in, you'd be raising the tax valuation for this TID coming on your on books as far as the TID out part of the valuation. So what happens when this happens is you're actually, yes, you have a higher tax levy, but you're spreading over that higher tax base caused by this TID, which brings your tax rate basically flat. So if, you know, an example I show on the bottom of the page here is the home valued at $100,000. Currently their taxes are $913, 4 cents less, and it'd be $913.01, 5 cents more if the TID were impacted. So really it's a wash because of that happening.
Under penny counts, so it's
Yes.
really, okay.
Yes. But that's really the analysis, and again, just really kind of a high-level piece to really say what happens if the TID were to close today, and how would that impact our school funding and our aid status and all those things.
That's helpful, thank you. All right, does anyone have any questions for these gentlemen?
Your bottom box is on an annual basis?
That's correct, yeah, it's not 5 cents per thousand on that $100,000 home, that's the net 5 cents on the actual tax bill that we'll be showing.
Thank you.
So, while you guys are here, we may as well have our discussion on what everyone feels. I know, Rick, you had mentioned at our last meeting how you felt, but I don't know that everyone was here, so perhaps you want to kick it off?
Sure, make me a bad get started. I guess my concern, especially when you're looking at a half-acre parcel, I can see when you're looking at larger parcels and you're looking at development. I mean, I was on the committee for a few of those in our neighborhood community when I lived there. I understand that, but this wasn't like it was a hidden site. A developer purchased the property knowing that the site was contaminated, and knowing, because there's no uncertain terms in anyone's mind what the city of Cedarburg expects in their historic district or anywhere else in the city as far as design. I mean, that's a given. And if that's the case, then it's kind of buyer beware. The developer who purchased the property should have been aware that that was what's happening. This to me, and I'm sorry, but it looks like taxpayers subsidize to help a developer develop a property. At one of the other meetings, I heard somebody discuss the fact of, it'd take a higher building design because it's Cedarburg and it's the downtown. And they mentioned the Washington and Western building that was built by a developer. And you're absolutely right, that's probably the type of building the city's gonna look for. But that developer built that building on their dime, and it must have been financially okay to do because they did it, and they haven't sold the building, so they must be making back their money. So my concern is taxpayers subsidizing this, and every penny, every dime on tax dollar that we put on our bill concerns me. And on the other side, if we wouldn't raise it, and we would just eat it, losing that money for our district and for our students is hard for me to swallow when we look at every savings of every penny we can. So for 20 years, that scares me.
And to your comment, I believe it's the same developer who's doing the TID that developed the parcel on Western in Washington. So, is that correct, guys?
I do not.
I think so, but I'm not into the.
So I think when it came, it was through that development process that he felt that he needed to get help. One with the TID and one with the blighted. Just a little history, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. Anyone else?
I guess I'll jump in. I wasn't at the last meeting where this was discussed, or if there was a previous discussion. I agree with Rick's comments, probably from a different perspective though. I work in the development world and see these all the time. The big issue for me always is two things: the but for this TID, could that property ever be developed? And out of fairness, I think yes, it could. It's not that it could never be developed, or it's this blighted, truly blighted area. I look at that and I think it's a pretty nice corner in Cedarburg. It's up to the individuals who own it, if they want to develop it, what they want to develop it as, and it's up to the city to approve those plans and construction techniques and what it looks like. That's up to the city to do. I don't see that, but for this TID, that property just will never be developed. I just don't see it that way. Everyone up in Cedarburg, everybody knew about the pollution there. It was a gas station when I was a little kid. It's not a hidden issue, as you brought up, Rick. This wasn't a hidden issue or oh my goodness, I never could have known this. In the development world, you do soil test for that. You find out the ground, the stone, the rock is very shallow there, I guess, when they were talking about a library there. That's really easy to figure out by doing a boring or two. The pollution issue is well known, well documented. I just don't see that, but for this TID and the rest of the community paying, even if it is 5 cents or 25 cents, it's a fairness issue. Should they be paying for this? And I just don't see this as a fair issue for people who have to fathom for 27 years possibly. I do have a question regarding that. On the system that's set up, does the district get one of the 5 or 6? How many people on the committee? How does this? Can you walk us through that process of getting it approved?
The joint review board is comprised of 5 members. Each of the taxing jurisdictions, so the city itself, the district, the MATC, and then also Ozaukee County. Then the 5th member is a public member, which is elected by the body itself at their first meeting.
And that's Jimmy Coots, right?
Correct.
And then like a 3-2 vote or unanimous, minimum of 3-2 vote?
A majority of the members present.
Okay, thank you.
Which is interesting because we are the actual highest taxing entity of that group. We see the biggest.
Right.
Could I just clarify that point, sir? And Keith, kick me here if I misstate this, but the analysis Keith had provided, essentially the district is going to get the revenue either from aids or from the property taxes, correct? So there's in essence no loss of revenue to the district during the life of the TID. Now that's not the case with the city, the county, and MATC, and that's where I was trying to make the point that schools are a little different, and certainly the but-for is still the standard. But the point we wanted to make is that there really is no loss under any circumstance to the district. It's just a question of whether that revenue is realized in the form of aids or in taxes.
there is a loss if we don't pass it on to our other taxpayers, correct?
Yeah, all I would say about that is this is more of a degree of magnitude type of analysis, and it's obviously not closing this year. And just that it's close to zero is, I think, the main takeaway, not the 5 cents or whatever that.
And I understand, but to say we don't lose that money, we only don't lose that money, the state allows us to pass that on to the rest of our taxpayers. If we decided not to do that, we would lose that money.
On closure.
Right, because we have to pass it on to someone. The state allows it, and we get our aid then if we do that, but we still have to pass it on to somebody. Someone still pays that down, that 5 cents on their 100,000, which isn't the actual average value of a house in the city of Cedarburg. It's significantly higher.
I just want to interrupt briefly. We're trying something on our agenda, and we're trying to schedule our public comment section for 8:15 p.m. So I'm just going to ask, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make public comments? Any issue at all? Going once, twice? All right, we're back. Commercial break. There we go. Jeff, Mark, any?
You know, I'm the guy 6 months ago who asked what a TID was, all right? So this isn't an area of expertise for me at all, not working in this realm. I just think about, okay, what's the flip side? The flip side is the TID goes through, there's significant development, the property's worth significantly more money, and therefore we draw significantly more tax benefit from it. That's the flip side, correct? But I realize that's a bit of we're rolling the dice. I certainly understand that, but am I wrong in assuming that? Is that the flip side?
I think after, and correct me if I'm wrong, after the period is paid off 20 years,
Correct.
27 years,
Right.
then the district recaptures the payment,
Gotcha.
but not until.
Not over that, not over that.
Right, gotcha. Okay.
My question would be, has there been a study done what, I don't know what's going in there, right? But my question would be, is any economic impact, if positive, area that would give us a positive impact? I don't know if that's been a thought or a study or commentary.
The primary thing we look at when we do the TIF analysis is whether or not the additional value that would be generated can cover the costs that are needed to enable that development. But one of the other considerations is sort of what are the other ancillary benefits. You know, there's the jobs or materials related to the construction. There's potentially additional employment opportunities, but there's been no study done to quantify, the impact of the two buildings that are proposed there. I think presumably to have additional development in the city is a good thing for the city, but beyond the property taxes, it's not been quantified.
I asked a number of questions at the Joint Review Board. Some of those questions included, are there any other TIFs being proposed? Is this TIF intended to spur additional development as per our conversation? There are no additional TIFs that are being considered at this time. It is not to spur additional development. I don't recall the number. I did not write the number of years that property has been vacant, but it seemed like it was 15.
That came up at a council meeting, and nobody had an exact number, but the consensus seemed to be it's been more than 20 years, and that was really the council's primary rationale, that they believe this property is not going to develop without TIF.
I asked,
But it's not for sale.
Correct.
So this owner has had it for some time, so it wasn't available for anyone else if they wanted to.
I asked questions regarding what would happen during the life if for whatever reason, which has happened in my experience, a portion of the TID was actually flipped into a not-for-profit because the church bought it, because the city couldn't develop it as intended, but they put in all the infrastructure improvements. Todd answered that question for me. If you'd like the detail, we can revisit that. In terms of the page 15, I asked a question because the third paragraph on page 13, which is the detailed list of projects, where the city retains the right to delete projects, change the scope, timing of the projects, without amending the plan, always, raises a red flag to me. But Todd indicated that that's standard language, and the city has, if this is approved, has full control over managing that, which certainly understand. There is an audit of the TID every year. I believe that we would have access as a taxing body, right? And just went through a number of things that, we had talked about. And as Todd mentioned on page 19, where the developer, has access to that cash grant through, 2020 in terms of, this is 2014, and that's a pretty decent span of time to get some traction. We talked about that, because again, the best thing is to get the property developed. This is going to happen ASAP, so that the increment can start accruing and start paying down that debt and hopefully pay off the TID even earlier than expected. So we went through, a lot of those issues, there are 5 members. It's listed on the second page, actually, of the document down at the bottom. So at the first meeting, I believe there were 4 representatives present. The tech college did not have a representative, right? So there'll be hopefully at least 4, 5 members present, and it's a majority. And the members can vote in favor, oppose, or abstain, right? Which is a no vote. Correct. Okay. So those are the options that
Can I ask a question here, taking a step back? Where is the impetus for this undertaking? Is this coming from the city? Is this coming from the owner of the property? Who's driving?
My understanding is the property owner in discussion approached the city and opened the discussion. And the city had multiple meetings over their plan commission looked at it. And they decided to go. And it wasn't a unanimous vote of their body when they voted on it.
It was or was not?
It was not.
And
You had to abstain.
when prior to when the property owner came to the city with this concept, had the city determined that this was a, quote, blighted area?
No. The blight determination is only necessary for the creation of the tax increment district. So there was knowledge of the contamination of the property from prior environmental reports, which I think were done in conjunction when the city was exploring this as a library site. But the blight is strictly a function of the TID district.
It was originally offered to the city for the library. And then they decided not to go with that.
By this owner, the current owner?
Current owner approached I think it was the library board because it came forward out of that. At least that's what I read in the paper.
What do you think? The only other thing I'd like to mention, a long time ago, when I was in Altoona, the document that Keith prepared for us, that $12,000 amount, the state at that time, and it was a very long time ago. We were barely part of the union at that time as a state. But to summarize this, the state actually had a line item to supplement as state aid $12,000. So if you created a TIF, even though you forfeited the tax dollars, they cut you a check for $12,000 before tax. That was before revenue caps. That was before lots of things. So things have changed a lot. But what I just want to make sure is that if I understand correctly, the tax impact and the dollar impact is in the neighborhood in terms of the tax amount of a nickel, and every penny matters to us. But in terms of revenue for the district, either from the state, from property taxes, from, Keith's, your analysis is net sum zero.
Correct.
Okay. All right, because I want to make sure that that's absolutely clear. The other thing that I just want to double check, have you, in terms of the TIDs in recent years, I was just curious, in terms of environmental remediation, half, a third of most of the TIDs involve remediation? Is that pretty?
I would say that's high.
That's not.
Yeah, this is just a guess,
Yeah.
but I would say perhaps 5 to 10% of tax increment districts, so.
Well, most of them just greenfield.
Well, I mean, the ones that tend to involve remediation are, usually older urban areas where you have the gas stations and factories.
Chevrolet. That's what
Hey,
it was.
Bill, did you have
Yes.
an opinion on that? What do you think?
Still forming my opinion.
And as your forming opinion, and I won't say anymore, at the last meeting, and I did share this with the joint review board, we definitely, as a school district, want to be a good partner. We have a reputation to be cooperative, and we certainly want to represent that to the extent we possibly can. So I shared that with the mayor and with the joint review board. That does not mean that there cannot be disagreements, and we can agree to disagree. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I did convey your message, and that is that we certainly always want to cooperate with the city, town, with our municipalities. We have a great relationship, and we simply want that to not only continue but to grow.
Well, and while the dollar amounts are relatively small, particularly to us, we're still going to wind up paying a disproportionately higher amount than the other tax communities, if I understand it correctly.
47, what is it, 47% or 48%?
Yeah.
Of the tax bill? We're going to be about
It's in
47
that
or
report.
48% of the tax bill is us.
Chris, I wasn't trying to duck your question.
No.
But I guess I'm operating more at the 30,000 foot level than I am with all the numbers and all of that. And I'm just not so sure I see the compelling need to do this. Unless it's, maybe I need to see plans, or maybe I need to see something, but just on the surface of it, that particular piece of property, bought it, knew what he had, hasn't tried to sell it apparently, and except other than the city as a possible site for the library, and now all of a sudden wants the city basically to provide advantageous financing for something that, I'm not sure needs to be done.
Right.
So that's where I'm struggling with it. I'm up here, I'm not down with the minutia.
Yeah. In my mind, I'd like to see that parcel developed. I was on the council for, 8 years, and, I think it needs to be developed, but like Rick and Kevin were saying, the developer knew what they had, and they had experience developing in the historic district, and to bridge that gap, I'd like to see something more of the lines of a TID where, whether you're building a new structure or you're putting in windows in the historic district, what's the cost that the historic district puts on it? So if the building costs, $100,000 to build in, next to Walgreens on Washington Ave, but when you put it in the historic district, it costs $125,000 because they want you to make it look like it's old, they want you to put on cedar shake and there's wood windows. but, I just don't, I don't see the overall need, I don't see the benefit to the school district in my mind. Gentlemen, any other thoughts?
I would lean towards no, more of what Kevin said. Was the gas station on both pieces of the property?
The front piece, I'm watching this.
So they both just get assigned to blighted, so it's, I don't know.
I don't know
Well, you
nothing
need,
about
you
this.
only need 50%, right?
50% of the area within the district has to meet a blighted condition to qualify.
The one, and the front piece is smaller than the back piece, so. I would tend to lean towards the no. And I do agree with Chris, it would be nice to see that develop. Yeah, absolutely. It's got a great use for the farmer's market this summer, but maybe parking in some of the festivals, but
Yeah.
it'd be nice to see a nice building there. At the same time, I would also look at it as we just put a little more than $12,000 into purchasing some band equipment, and I think Rick said it well, as you know, pennies mean a lot to us.
Mark, do you have anything to add?
I mean, traditionally, or the track records of TID's just not very good.
Well, in
I-
Cedarburg, they're not good.
I mean, I realize the payback, you've got to wait a long time for the payback, but I mean, is that the biggest stumbling block? It's 20+ years before you see the pay. I mean, again, I realize every situation is going to be different. Every construction, every development is going to be different, but traditionally speaking, just not a good return.
And I think Chris is right, it depends on the municipality. Some have had great success with them. Our neighbors, Grafton, have had some great success, but when you hit tough economic times, you know, so it's,
The city's had two TIDs. The first one, TID 1, has actually been closed for many years, but that was the Sultan Industrial Park, and that was really quite successful. I think the payback was like 12 years. The only other TID the city's created was created right around the time the recession started, and the development was created to facilitate, just never happened because of the economy, so that TID just basically never went anywhere, and will likely be closed soon.
I'd like to echo what Dr. Lamerson was saying. I mean, even though I don't think this passed the but-for test, I do really want to always work well with the city. We've had great relationships with the city and the town, and I would love to see the site developed. It's not anything to do with that. It's just, to me, it's
Absolutely.
but for this. It's the only issue that it's more of a fairness issue, not the dollars and cents, because you're right, it's very small increment to. I just think it's a fairness issue, and it doesn't pass the but-for test that TIDS should pass. That's the only fundamental reason. But I truly want to work with the city, and I don't want this to cause any animosity whatsoever.
I agree. And Kevin, I like your but for, because when I was the village president, we were looking at, we were trying to come up, that's a perfect but for. We always talked about, you know, will this happen without us meddling? But for is a perfect way of putting it.
It's not my idea. I think that it's expanded
You stole it
all
from
over the
somebody?
place. It's a statewide term they use. Right, it's not my idea.
I hear you.
Could have made it up, though.
So,
We were gonna come for it.
I think what we have here is a consensus of the board is leaning towards the no, from what I've heard. If anyone disagrees with that, let me know. For you, Dr. Lamerson, and then, gentlemen from the others, I really appreciate you guys
Thank you.
taking the time out of your evening.
Yeah,
It's very well appreciated.
Well explained.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Todd, just so that I know, was the city council meeting after the joint board, the city council took action
Council met and approved this past Monday evening.
unanimously? or-
Unanimously.
That's great. If you have any other comments, questions, or whatever prior to November 18th, send them my way. Left the door open for me to contact them at any time to follow up with any questions that you might have. Keith, nice meeting you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Let the record reflect that David Creer is still not in the room, and that Rick Leach is going to get him. So he wasn't involved in any discussions regarding TIP. And then we're going to move on to the school district commission. Once Mr. Leach and Mr. Creer get back in.
It's really just need a doctor, calendar 9 days after.
This is just to prime the pump a little bit for our November meeting, which will have committee of whole conversation regarding a number of issues, and including the mission. I simply wanted to highlight that one of the three legs of the stool for our mission is that our students become lifelong learners. Again, another leg is responsible members of the local community, and the third leg, that they achieve their goals and dreams. But I wanted to share with you the feedback that I received to date from board members. If you have any additional feedback, send them my way. But I wanted to just highlight, because we'll talk about this at the November meeting in 3 weeks, the suggestions for additions and/or deletions, and we can certainly take things out, for the listing of deliverables or the explanation of what lifelong learning means to us in our district. The first comment for the each student will experience an exemplary dynamic program and develop dispositions like mindset of improvement, metacognition, etc. The suggestion was, can we add a teach a logic course? Which I thought was really, a great suggestion. How we would weave that into as evidenced by, I think, there are various ways we could do that, but if you'd be thinking about that, that'd be great. And perhaps maybe what that logic course would look like in terms of reasoning, in terms of fallacy of argumentation, those kinds of things. And I appreciate seeing the suggestion, because I really think this mission aligns to the issue that really we're developing leaders, and as our future leaders, both statewide and nationally, and I think that it's been a really great conversation. Then a suggestion was made that we look at adding in the explanation of what a lifelong learning means to us, that not only are they academically proficient, that is, they are at or above grade level, but they'll make academic progress, and relative to our higher than common expectations. I thought that was a really interesting way to put that. Be thinking about that. And then regarding academic success, that had to do with how are we doing in relation to other high-performing schools, districts in the state and nationally. And the suggestion was that we change relative to other high-performing districts to significantly exceed other high-performing districts. So I'd like to have some conversation about what that means, and also kind of what that looks like. And what, maybe have a little bit of conversation about, what things we might need to think about in order to really accomplish that. It's really pretty fascinating when we look at just resources, which we talked a little bit about tonight, right? We're going to, we're spending in the neighborhood of $11,000 a student. Scarsdale, New York is spending $25,000. Winter High School is spending $23,000. They're these high-performing districts, which we're in that group in terms of resources. So that means we have to do things very different, incredibly efficient. But we all know resources matter too. So that'll be a really great conversation. And then also the suggestion was, which I thought was a really good ad. The students gathered feedback from school and parents on their performance. The From School and Parents was an ad to, again, bring in the full partnership, and then to add a statement that students will share those successes with their parents, making sure that that's explicit instead of implicit. So those are the suggestions that have come to me today. If you have anything in the next 3 weeks, I'd like to pull those together. I'd like to have a conversation in 3 weeks only about lifelong learning. Because what I'd like to do is maybe get this in the done column at the November meeting, then we'll look at the next leg, and then the third leg, and then hopefully we'll have something together that we feel comfortable with and will approve in its entirety.
Great.
Does that sound like a plan? Okay. All right.
All right, appreciate it.
I just have a question. After something recently I read. This has nothing, our change in our mission has nothing to do with Common Core state standards or any of that. This was started locals with that, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay.
That is absolutely correct.
I take it back, didn't we give that to Dr. Wilson as a goal when we first started to review a number of items that we identified, like in the mission statement, coming in from the outside, looking at it, there was some feedback. I love this, to be honest. So,
Yeah, it's good. I appreciate the clarification, because there was some confusion in the public about the purpose of the redoing the mission statement or updating it.
Actually, I think it was before Dr. Lamerson was even hired, we were talking about it.
I'd like to just throw out my 2 cents to you now. I really liked, as I read through this, the comments about truth-seeking, skilled questioners, and active learners. Those are things that I looked at when I read this, is those are measures I would look at for students, that they are lifelong learners, are active learners, if they question things in a skillful way and want to seek, truth-seeking. People who do that are lifelong learners, so I really like that you had those in there. And I also really like the changes you made in red to the whole item, and the logic course is very interesting. I don't know how to accomplish it, but it's neat concept to get to seek some of those things.
I appreciate the feedback. What's exciting to me at the end of the day, when we talk about this, now the mission statement is not a light switch, so now we can turn it on and now we're there. This is a journey. Typically missions are aspirational, so they're really hard to accomplish, and maybe you can just get really close. But to think about what life is like if an 18-year-old captures this and acquires these habits, these set of skills, the kind of impact that 18-year-old will have on not only his or her life, but in the lives of others will be phenomenal. As we know, a lot of adults are still struggling with some of these things, but for us to be very intentional about providing that for our students.
It's a tall order.
It's very tall. It's very tall. Great, thanks for the feedback, I appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Do you have anything else under the superintendent notes?
I do not.
Move on to item 7. Mr. Bray, would you like to speak any more on P&F? I know that was pretty much a lot of what we did tonight was what you had already talked about.
yeah, I forgot to thank the other committee members. Coming to those meetings, I know it takes time out of your world, but I do appreciate it because it does move us along. And I also forgot to thank Ann and Conrad for us picking on the meetings and for taking all the notes and keeping us straight.
There you go.
You all right with that?
You're welcome. You're gonna, my pleasure.
That's all, Mr. President.
All right. So now we're going to take a motion, if we read this, to adjourn into executive session where it's anticipated the board will adjourn to closed session to discuss specific personnel issues of employees for which the school board exercises responsibility, which, if discussed in public, could have an adverse effect on the reputation of any person referred to in such consideration pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.851 F and C. And 2, to consider administrative employees' performance evaluation, contract renewal or non-renewal, and compensation pursuant to sections 19.851C and E of the Wisconsin statutes. And 3, to approve executive session minutes of September 17th, and we also might adjourn into open session where we may reconvene to open session to take action regarding administrative compensation for 2014-15, and then we would adjourn. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to convene the closed session.
Second?
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
You want to watch it?
Well,